The sandwich was still warm, the hand-ground coffee still steaming, but Janet didn't even glance at it. She walked past the dining table like it was invisible, heels tapping a quiet farewell across the floor as she picked up her bag and keys. "I'm running late," she said, not looking at him. She always said that, every morning for the past 4 days. And then the front door clicked shut. Jimmy stood there, the crusts of her favorite sandwich curling at the edges. The same sandwich he'd made for her every single day, no ketchup, a soft-boiled egg between 2 lightly toasted triangles, just enough pepper. She used to smile when he handed it over. Not anymore. He walked to the door and opened it slowly. The sharp morning air stung against his skin. At the end of the driveway, her car turned the corner. Then she was gone. And that's when it hit him. A rush, so fast, so violent it knocked the air out of his lungs, like a broken dam bursting inside his mind. The forgotten past life, the book. This wasn't real, not entirely. This world, this life, this marriage, it was all written, scripted, pre-decided. He was living inside a novel. No, not just living in it. He was the original husband, the placeholder, the man written to be used, discarded, then destroyed. He clutched the edge of the doorframe. 25 years ago, he'd been reincarnated into this book, but the memories hadn't come, not until now. Now, after he had already married Janet. Now, after 2 years of pouring himself into a marriage that was never meant to survive. Now, when Janet had already started drifting away from him, her laughter no longer his, her breakfast eaten elsewhere. He remembered the plot in brutal detail. Janet, the brilliant CEO heroine, a cold woman who didn't believe in love. And then Michael arrived, a fresh-faced intern, wide-eyed, hopeful, the emotional contrast to her polished detachment. The eye would collide, first professionally, then emotionally. Michael would teach her softness, Janet would discover desire. And in the middle of it all stood Jimmy, the husband who loved too much, controlled too tightly, and ultimately pushed her into the arms of another. He was written to be the trigger, the villain, the failure. Jimmy staggered backward, the sandwich on the table blurred in his vision, the coffee now smelled bitter. He whispered, "Damn it." A laugh broke from his throat, dry, cracked, hollow. "If only I had remembered earlier," he murmured. He turned his head toward the empty hallway. "I wouldn't have loved her for 22 years. Jimmy was 28 years old, and everything about him had been built on order. A man of routines, a man of lists, a man who remembered small things, like which drawer Janet kept her favorite tea in, or how many seconds her coffee beans needed in the grinder to bring out the flavor she liked. He was the kind of man who knew what time her meetings ended just by how fast she typed good morning into their shared calendar. But above all, Jimmy was the kind of man who loved Janet long before she knew what love even meant. He had grown up with her. She moved in next door when she was 3, he was 6, their mothers were friends, their fathers both businessmen who barely made it home before dinner. In their earliest memories, Jimmy was always reaching out, holding her hand when she tripped, shielding her from a stray soccer ball, lifting her onto the monkey bars when her legs were too short to climb. It started as protection, it became devotion. Janet had been a quiet child, disciplined, introverted, a little cold. But Jimmy never minded. He was all noise where she was silence, all sun where she was shade. She liked puzzles, he built her towers from them. She liked books, he read them aloud. He made space for her in every version of his life, no matter how tight that life got. By the time they were teenagers, Jimmy had already learned how to iron his own shirts, cook rice without a rice cooker, and lace Janet's skates before gym class. She never asked, but she never stopped him either. In middle school, he stood in front of her when a boy made fun of her for being too serious. In high school, he memorized her exam schedule and brought her hot cocoa on the days he knew she skipped breakfast. When she got into university, he found an internship in the same city, just so she wouldn't be alone. He didn't say it was for her, but it always was. She moved in with him during her second year of college. A one-bedroom apartment, cramped, noisy from the traffic outside, but Jimmy made it feel like home. Every morning, he woke early to cook breakfast. At first, his cooking was average. Janet didn't complain, but he could tell from the way her chopsticks paused, or how she drank water between every bite. So he practiced. Recipes. Techniques. Timing. Eventually, he mastered her preferences. Soft boiled eggs with a dusting of white pepper, no sauces in sandwiches, porridge not too thick, dumplings only pan-fried, not steamed. He even learned to grind coffee beans by hand, not because it tasted better, but because Janet said the sound of the machine was too sharp in the morning. He replaced it with the quiet rhythm of stone burrs and patience. He loved her the way storms loved quiet forests, too much, too fiercely. But Janet accepted his love like someone being handed a coat in the rain. She put it on, yes, but she never looked back at who gave it to her. She said yes when he proposed, calmly, almost clinically. He thought it was her way, her shy silence. He thought that maybe one day he'd see a flash of emotion in her eyes that matched his. But that day never came. Jimmy remembered their wedding photo session too clearly. The photographer asked them to smile. Jimmy did, Janet didn't, not once, not even a polite one. Later, he overheard someone whisper, "She looks like someone forced her to marry." He'd wanted to yell, but swallowed it. She wasn't unhappy, just nervous. That's what he told himself. That's what he always told himself. They sat across from each other at every meal since the day they moved in, always across, never beside. It never struck him as odd, until now, until he remembered the book. Until he remembered how, in the story, she never loved the original husband, only the intern, only the man who made her feel something real. Clara Nen noticed it first, Janet's best friend, quiet, artistic, observant. She once asked Jimmy, during a dinner party, "Does she love you back, or are you just constant?" He laughed at the time. "What does that mean?" Clara only shook her head. "I mean, you're always there. Would she love you if you weren't?" That question had haunted Jimmy for months. He brushed it off then. But now, in the silence of his memory, it thundered back louder than ever. He had never doubted Janet before. Not when she forgot his birthday twice. Not when she turned her head away when he kissed her in public. Not when she said thank you instead of I love you after their anniversary dinner. Not until now. Now, the memories felt like someone else's life. A man who mistook routine for intimacy. A man who loved fiercely but never learned to ask if he was loved back. Jimmy looked down at the coffee on the table. The surface had turned cold. He thought of all the mornings he'd woken up early just to make her breakfast. 22 years of knowing her. 2 years of marriage. And now, she was falling in love with someone else, just like the book said. It started small, that's what always hurt the most. Nothing loud, nothing dramatic, just the slow erosion of habit. Janet stopped taking the coffee. At first, she said she was full, then she said it was too early, then she didn't say anything at all. The sandwich, carefully wrapped in the napkin with her initials embroidered, began to rot on the table each morning. Jimmy still made it. Out of hope, out of defiance, or maybe because he didn't know how to stop. But now he knew. He remembered the story's rhythm. He was watching it unfold day by day. The heroine would slowly pull away from the original husband. Coldness mistaken as exhaustion. Indifference masked as ambition. 1,000 tiny choices that all said the same thing. You're no longer the center. He started hearing a name, Michael. It came up over dinner. Michael's learning fast. He picked up the presentation software quicker than the others. Then another time. Michael's ideas are raw, but I like the way he challenges the team. Then, Michael brought breakfast for everyone today, soy milk and fried dough sticks. Jimmy listened, smiled, nodded, pretended. Michael, from marketing, no, Michael the intern, the one fated to win her heart, the one written into the plot as her awakening, the beginning of her real story. Jimmy knew the beats too well. Michael wasn't the villain, he was the catalyst. So Jimmy did something he never used to do. He visited Janet's office, unannounced. The receptionist looked startled when he walked through the glass doors, but she didn't stop him. He had the clearance, he still had the title, husband. He stepped into the elevator, straight to the 32nd floor, Janet's floor. The lights were soft, the hallway quiet, sterile with success. As he approached the office, he passed her assistant, who flinched the moment he saw Jimmy. "Mr. Wang, sir, Janet's in a meeting right now. Jimmy G. Gave him a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Is she?" He didn't slow down. The door to her office was slightly ajar. Jimmy pushed it open gently, quietly, like he'd done 100 times before. The room smelled faintly of jasmine and wood polish. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, casting golden streaks across the polished floors. And there they were, Janet and Michael. Sitting on the couch, not the desk, side by side, their knees nearly touching. In front of them, 2 lunchboxes, cartoon-themed, cats, pink outlines, matching chopsticks. Michael was speaking animatedly. Janet laughed softly, her hand covering her mouth. Her face, bathed in sunlight, looked softer than he'd seen it in years. Jimmy didn't speak. He just lifted his phone. Snap, the shutter sound echoed in the room. He forgot to turn it off. Both heads turned. Janet's smile faltered. Michael froze, eyes wide, spoon still halfway to his mouth. Jimmy? Janet stood quickly, startled but not apologetic. Michael fumbled, elbow knocking into the soup container. The hot broth spilled down his leg and he yelped. Janet reached for him. Careful. Jimmy turned and walked away. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. That night, he sat in his office and opened his laptop. The screen glowed cold against the silence. He clicked on a blank document and typed 2 words. Divorce agreement. He called his lawyer. I want you to draft it tonight, Jimmy said. Martin sounded confused. Yours and Janet's? Yes. Do you want to divide the assets? No, give her everything. I don't care about any of it. There was a pause. Are you sure? Jimmy closed his eyes. I just want out. I want to save myself before the plot destroys me. He hung up and sat in the dark. At dawn, Jimmy stood in the center of the master bedroom, a cardboard box in his hands. The air in the house was still. He could hear the wind outside the window, rustling the ginkgo leaves. He'd planted that tree for her, the first year they moved in. She said she liked how ginkgo trees turned gold in autumn. He chose the spot himself, right where the window light would hit it every morning. He told the movers to rip it out. He packed everything, his clothes, his books, even the scarf Clara gifted him last winter. He told the staff to remove anything masculine, razors, cologne, gym equipment, his office chair. Take down the bookshelf, he said, and the carpets. Yes, sir. Throw away the matching mugs. Yes, sir. He didn't leave a note. He didn't tell Janet. She wouldn't notice, not yet, maybe not for days. But when she did, it would be too late. The house, the city, the marriage, it would all be emptied of him. And this time, he wouldn't come back. It had been 3 days since Jimmy moved out of the house in City A. 3 mornings of waking up at 6 a.m., still walking into the kitchen half asleep, still reaching for the bread and eggs like nothing had changed. His hands moved out of habit. Toast, soft-boiled egg, 2 slices of peppered luncheon meat, no sauce, lettuce folded neatly. Halfway through wrapping the sandwich in the napkin with her initials, he paused. The knife slipped. The edge of the toast caught his palm. The pain was mild, but the sting in his chest wasn't. He stared at the sandwich, still warm, still made with care. Still no one to give it to. By 7 a.m., he was dressed and inside the office. No one expected him in this early. That made it easier. He buried himself in reports, scanned spreadsheets, reviewed contracts. But every time he reached for a pen, he remembered how Janet used to correct his grip with a small laugh, her fingers brushing his. Every time he passed the kitchen coffee machine, he remembered her voice saying, "It's too bitter, grind it less." Every routine had her fingerprints. He tried to erase her from muscle memory. It didn't work. Then something clawed at his thoughts, an odd detail he couldn't unsee. The hospital. In the book, there had been a pregnancy. Susan, the female lead, had gotten pregnant, but Bill, the husband, never knew. He thought she had miscarried, or aborted, but the truth was crueler. He'd pushed her by accident during a fight and she lost the baby. But Jimmy hadn't fought Janet. Still, the signs, she hadn't had her period in weeks. He knew her cycle, had tracked it for years, even when she told him not to fuss. He didn't tell anyone where he was going, he just drove. The hospital wasn't far. He spotted her at the entrance of the gynecology department. No assistant, no driver. She sat alone, back perfectly straight, tapping her fingers on her phone, waiting. We aren't in. He waited. 2 hours passed, he didn't blink. When she came out, she clutched a small stack of documents. She paused by the trash can. Then, slowly, she ripped the papers into small, perfect pieces. No emotion, just control. She walked out. Jimmy walked in the opposite direction. That night, he sat in the suite he'd rented, alone, silent, almost calm. He didn't drink, didn't cry, just stared at the table in front of him. The photo, that single snapshot of her and Michael. Side by side, lunchboxes between them, laughing. He printed more. Joel had sent dozens, rooftop glances, coffee exchanged, chopsticks feeding, proximity so close their shoulders touched. At 9 p.m., Janet knocked. She didn't ask permission when she stepped in, just stood at the doorway. "Why did you go to the hospital?" Jimmy didn't answer. He reached into his folder and spread the photos on the table. Like a deck of cards. She didn't flinch. She looked through them slowly. One by one. No denial. Jimmy sat across from her, elbow on the table, hand half curled like it was holding a cigarette that didn't exist. "Michael and I are just friends," she finally said. He let out a laugh, dry, cruel. Even friends don't make each other homemade porridge and laugh like that. "He's young, he's sincere." "You mean stupid?" Janet's jaw tightened. "He looks up to me." "Does he bow too?" She stepped closer. "This is ridiculous." "I agree," Jimmy said, standing. "That's why I filed for divorce." Her face didn't move, but her fingers gripped the table's edge. "No, I'm not signing it," Jimmy sighed. "Don't make this harder than it is. You're just upset, it's a misunderstanding." "Oh, I've misunderstood for 22 years? You're angry. I'm humiliated." She blinked, that caught her, the door opened again. "Michael." "Of course." He stood awkwardly at the threshold, holding a paper bag. "I didn't know you were here," he muttered. "Good," Jimmy said. "Now you do, leave." Michael didn't move. "I came to explain." Jimmy held up a hand. "Don't, you'll waste both our time." Michael stepped forward, eyes brimming. "You transferred me. I didn't do anything. Why are you ruining my career?" Jimmy tilted his head. "Ruining? You demoted me. I restructured. You just happened to be in the path." Michael clenched his fists. "You're taking it out on me because you're jealous." Jimmy chuckled. "Jealous? Of you? You had her all these years and still lost her." Jimmy smiled without warmth. "And yet she's still my wife." Michael's voice cracked. "Why did you fire my parents?" Jimmy stopped. "Your what?" "They worked in your company. For years. You had them let go." Jimmy slowly sat down again. "And you think I did that? Because of you?" Michael nodded. Jimmy exhaled. "You want gratitude?" Michael didn't answer. "Next time you have an emergency, call 911, not my wife." Janet stepped between them. "That's enough." Jimmy stood, walked to the window. "I'm tired," he said. "You're overreacting," Janet said. "Am I? You're doing all of this based on some photos and gossip." 22 years, he whispered. "And I can't recall the last time you laughed like that with me." She opened her mouth. He didn't give her the chance. "I gave you everything. My childhood, my loyalty, my patience, my silence." She didn't move. "I'm not asking for love anymore," he said. "I'm just asking to leave." The tension in the room broke with the sudden clatter of porcelain. Janet had taken a step toward him, just one, and her knees buckled like a marionette with cut strings. The teacup in her hand shattered on the floor. She stumbled, then crumpled, hands instinctively wrapping around her stomach as her face twisted in pain. "Janet!" Jimmy moved before his thoughts could catch up, catching her just before she hit the ground. She was pale, so pale, and her breath came in short, ragged bursts. "My stomach," she whispered, gripping his sleeve. "It hurts." "Don't move," he said, his voice too steady for the way his chest was tightening. "Stay with me." He carried her to the car himself. Janet's assistant panicked, offering help, but Jimmy didn't look back. His hands trembled on the wheel as he drove, speeding, cutting through traffic like the car had nothing to lose. At the hospital, he barked orders: a doctor, a bed, a checkup, anything, everything. Time blurred. When the doctor finally emerged from the room, Jimmy stood instantly. Is she? She's okay for now, the doctor said, but she's showing signs of a threatened miscarriage. She needs rest, less stress, proper monitoring, no more shocks, no more emotional pressure. Do you understand? Jimmy's legs went cold. She's pregnant? The doctor gave him a careful look. Yes, she didn't tell you? Jimmy didn't answer. She's lucky, the doctor added. Had she arrived a little later, we might have had a different outcome. He nodded, walked into her room. Janet was hooked to an IV, her lips dry, her eyes barely open. When she saw him, something in her expression cracked. Not the polished poise she wore in boardrooms, not the distant calm she gave in marriage, just raw, trembling fear. Bill, she whispered. Jimmy didn't correct her, not this time. I was going to tell you, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't know how. He stood by the edge of the bed, not touching her, not sitting down. You weren't going to tell me at all. I was afraid you'd still leave. I already had. She looked away, eyes wet. I thought if I said it, you'd think I was trying to trap you. Were you? He asked quietly. No. Silence fell between them. Outside, a nurse wheeled a cart down the hallway. Inside, the only sound was the steady beep of her monitor. I wanted to keep the baby, Janet whispered, even after you left. Jimmy closed his eyes. Then why did you tear up the report? I panicked. He didn't respond. I thought maybe I didn't deserve to keep something that belonged to us, she said. Jimmy sat down at last, folded his hands, let the pain settle in like weight. For 22 years I gave you everything, he said, and in 660 weeks, you never sat beside me at a single meal. Janet blinked, confused. 6,000 meals, minimum, always across from me, like we were in a negotiation. He exhaled, slow. But Michael, you sat next to him after 2 months, you laughed with him, you shared your lunchbox. That's not fair. It's true. She swallowed, eyes glistening. I didn't know how to express it. I didn't grow up like you. I do love you. Jimmy stared at her. Then love me like I'm not furniture, he said, his voice low. Love me like I'm not the table you always sit across from, or the wallpaper you pass without noticing. I'm sorry, she choked. Let's start over. Please, let's try again. You should have said that before. I didn't know how to lose you until I already had. Jimmy leaned back, exhausted. I'm not the man who begs anymore, he said, and I'm not the man who waits. Then what are you? The man who gave you everything, he said, standing, and is finally ready to keep something for himself. He turned, hand on the door. Wait, she called out. What about the baby? He paused. You have a week, he said without turning around. Decide if you want to keep it. Either way, I'm filing the divorce. You're just going to leave? I already did, and he walked out of the room. 1 week passed. Jimmy didn't hear from Janet, not directly. She didn't call, didn't text, no messages, no visits, but her silence wasn't absence, it was resistance. His lawyer confirmed it. She hasn't signed anything. He didn't ask why. Instead, he went back to work, quietly, systematically. It was the only place where everything still made sense, profit and loss, input and output, no gray area, no misplaced emotions. That was when he noticed something strange in the HR reports. 2 names flagged for termination under disciplinary restructuring, low-level employees, administrative department, Michael's parents. The realization came slowly. He hadn't known they worked there. He hadn't connected the dots, didn't care to. But someone must have done it on his behalf, someone eager to curry favor, someone assuming this was revenge. Michael must have thought so too, because 3 days later, he stormed into Jimmy's office uninvited. Jimmy looked up from his desk. You're brave. Michael's face was flushed with frustration. He was holding a folded termination letter in both hands like a protest sign. You had my parents fired. I didn't even know your last name. You knew enough. Jimmy stood up, buttoned his jacket slowly. I don't use billions to play, Michael. Michael stepped back, voice shaking. Then what do you use them for? Jimmy walked around the desk, calm, cold. I use them to win. Michael's lips parted, but no words came. His confidence was crumbling fast. I run an empire, I manage 5 subsidiaries, I don't micromanage HR for petty vengeance, Jimmy said, but if I had known your parents were involved, I wouldn't have fired them. I would have bought out their pensions and made them resign, voluntarily, proudly, with a thank you speech. Michael flinched. So don't confuse fallout with intention, you're not that important. The door burst open. Janet. No client. No assistant. She walked in with eyes like winter. What the hell is going on? Jimmy didn't look at her. Ask your friend. She turned to Michael. Why are you here? Michael looked between them. You didn't tell him? Tell me what? Jimmy said sharply. Michael lowered his gaze. We never even kissed. Jimmy's jaw tightened. He didn't blink. That's the saddest part. What? Jimmy turned to him, voice hollow. That I lost everything. Over someone who didn't even matter. Janet's mouth opened, then closed, her face faltered. I'll do anything, transfer him, fire him, cut him off, I'll never speak to him again. Jimmy finally looked at her. Her hair was tied back, her lipstick faintly smudged. She looked tired, desperate, human. You're defending the wrong man, he said. I'm not defending him. You are, you always have, maybe not with your words, but with your actions. I made a mistake. You made a pattern. She reached for him. Let's talk, alone. Michael took the hint and left, eyes red, shoulders hunched like a boy caught in a thunderstorm. The door clicked shut. Jimmy turned his back to her. You act like cutting him off will erase what's already been done. I don't care about him. Then why did you act like you did? Janet's voice cracked. I didn't mean to. He faced her slowly. When I walked into your office that day and you were sitting beside him, laughing like I hadn't seen you laugh in years, do you know what I felt? She didn't answer. I felt small. She flinched. Like all those years of breakfast and coffee and soft-boiled eggs meant nothing. Like 22 years of being there every single day could be outshined by 2 months of lunchboxes. I didn't mean it like that. You never mean anything, Janet. That's the problem. You just exist. And the people around you, we orbit. She stepped closer. I'm here now. I'm choosing you. Jimmy shook his head. You're choosing not to be alone. That's not true. Even if I still love you, he said softly. I can't stay. Her hands dropped. You still love me? He didn't answer. She reached into her bag, pulled out the papers. I had them reprinted, she whispered. The divorce agreement. He didn't speak. She set them on the desk. She picked up the pen. She signed. Her hand trembled, the pen tore slightly through the final stroke of her name. She placed the pen down carefully, like it was a weapon, then she stepped back. There, you got what you wanted. Jimmy nodded once, quiet. She turned away first, biting her lip, shoulders shaking. No wailing, no sobbing, just the kind of crying that slips out when pride isn't there to catch it. He walked to the window, didn't look back, didn't stop. The silence in the car was colder than the night air outside. Janet sat in the passenger seat, eyes hollow, hands trembling against her lap. Jimmy didn't speak. He drove with both hands on the wheel, posture straight, expression unreadable. He didn't ask her if she was okay. He didn't tell her she would be. When they reached the gates of their old house in City A, the one she had once designed the foyer tiles for, he parked and got out, walked to her side, opened the door. She stepped out slowly. He handed her the overnight bag she had brought from the hospital. Then he said, I'll support the child, but I won't support your self-pity. She looked up at him, rain beginning to fall, just missed at first, but he was already turning away. That was the last time he saw her pregnant. 3 weeks later, the call came from Joel. She lost the baby, Joel said quietly. No humor in his voice for once. Miscarriage, emotional stress, the doctor said. She didn't cry, just sat there like someone unplugged her. Jimmy only replied, okay. He didn't ask for details, he didn't visit. But the next day, he did stop by the hospital. Late, when visiting hours were technically over. He left a bouquet on the windowsill, ginkgo leaves tucked into the stems, subtle and dry. The same tree he had once planted for her, now gone from their front yard. A quiet way to say, I remember. A quieter way to say, I'm still walking away. He didn't stay long, didn't leave a note. Just walked down the hospital corridor, the soles of his shoes tapping quietly against polished tile, like the final punctuation of a long sentence. Days passed. Then Joel came to his office again. She sent Michael away. Jimmy didn't look up from his laptop. Said he misunderstood everything. That it wasn't what he thought. She never meant for things to go that far. Jimmy kept typing. Joel crossed his arms. I told you, she picks so. Kid you, man, in the end. In the end, Jimmy repeated. After the credits rolled. Joel blinked. You don't want to know what else she said? No. Joel hesitated. She's not the same anymore. She never was. Joel gave a quiet nod and left. And Jimmy finally leaned back in his chair, eyes closing, the weight in his chest no longer pulling downward, just hovering like dust. The kind that never goes away, but no longer suffocates. Somewhere across the city, Janet stood in the old kitchen. She looked at the spot where the coffee maker used to be. Looked at the bare corner where the ginkgo sapling once reached toward the light. She touched the edge of the marble counter, tracing it like a memory. She wasn't crying. She had cried enough. Now, all that remained was silence, and the slow creeping realization that nothing more would come. Not a knock, not a message, not him. She wandered upstairs, into the bedroom where their wedding photo had once hung. She remembered the photo shoot. The way the photographer had told her to lean in, to smile. She hadn't. She had folded her hands neatly and stared straight ahead. Jimmy had smiled enough for both of them. She sat on the bed. She remembered their college days, his awkward bike with one flat pedal, how he used to wait outside her art history class every Tuesday, never asked why she always looked exhausted, just carried her bag. She remembered his proposal. He didn't kneel, he just placed the ring on the table beside her mug. Only if you want it, he had said. She hadn't smiled that day either. And now, in the dim light of their old bedroom, she remembered Clara's words from long ago. Does she love you back, or are you just constant? At the time, Janet had overheard it and dismissed it. She thought constancy was enough, that having someone who stayed meant she never needed to learn how to reach back. She thought he'd never leave, but even anchors snap if you shake them long enough. And Jimmy, her quiet storm, her warm morning, her shadow of 2 decades, was gone, truly gone. Her phone buzzed. A new calendar reminder. It had been automatically set long ago. Anniversary, pasta night. She stared at it, then deleted it. She sat alone and whispered to no one. If only love could be seen, he wouldn't have had to wait 22 years for a smile.